This is the second most important video I'm ever going to do for this channel. And it's an early channel update, and for the most part it is a fairly serious one, but please stick with me. I have been doing this channel for almost 10 years. Yes, this is a depressing thought, thank you for asking. For those of you that have been here since the Master of Orion and Galactic Civilizations 2 days, congratulations, we got old and lame together. And yeah, I miss good 4X games too. RIP. For the last 3-ish years, I've also been working on a video game, and I've had to juggle my main job as this weird UI, UX designer and developer the whole time. At times, it's been exhilarating to work on my own game Project Rena, but more recently, I've really been stretched thin and suffered from some really brutal burnout. The fact is, it was just getting too difficult. I have a personal life and a family now, and juggling these with 2 jobs and running a YouTube channel is just getting too difficult. I tend to be a pretty private guy. Very few people in the real world know that I have a YouTube channel. A few more know that I had a game dev project I was working on, but still not that many. On camera, I rarely share too much from my personal life, aside from maybe the intro to Final Fantasy 15. And the fact that I've shared the game dev journey with you all up until this point. But I'm going to share something now, and you'll see how this ties in. I grew up poor. I think I've mentioned it in a couple of videos, but a side effect of that, and a lot of the reasons we stayed poor, is because there was not lots of stability. So a side effect of that is that I'm a bit more risk averse, and I have a strong bias towards stability now. So that brings us back to the channel and the game project I've been working on and the job I have that puts a roof over my head and that of my family and food in our tummies. One of them had to go. Now, I've titled this the second most important video, blah, 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 or something to that effect. So maybe you've correctly assumed that there will be more videos and the channel will go on. That's the plan. I outlined the plan for the channel, and it was like the first update of 2019 or 2018 year in review or something, and that's the plan and we're sticking to it. So that leads me to the big thing. Now, I'm sorry if you were hoping that I was going to drop a trailer for the game in this video. That is sadly not the case. This is the video where I tell you that I quit my job so I can focus 100% on game development because fuck it, you only live once, and I've been a good boy and played by the normal rules for long enough. Development on the game was slowing down, I was getting burnt out, and then I was getting depressed and just developing anxiety problems, and something had to go, so it was work. As of Monday, I work full-time for Reclamation Games. I took a week off after I quit my job, collected some overdue vacation pay, did a little work around the office, around the house, cleared my head, got some psychological separation from a job I was ready to quit, and now we hit the road and we go. I have money saved up. Full disclosure, I'm going to tell you everything. Welcome to my private life. I have 1 year to finish the game. This is still a really reckless and impulsive decision, and stuff still has to get paid for. So basically what I'm saying is I'm still doing the channel. I'm not quitting you. This 10-year marriage we've had, it means something to me. Basically, look, if you're on the fence about the Patreon thing, or if you're interested in the game project, which, yeah, I'll reveal a little bit more now. It's been super hypothetical and cryptic and nothing but like game design talks from me occasionally and music clips. I'll disclose a bit more. I have 1 year. I have some fairly intense pressure. When I think about it, it gets stressful. So I just bottle that all up and just lash out at people at weird times. That's my current strategy. And try pouring all that into doing good work, basically. Use that energy to stay off Reddit. So that's what's going on. If you can help, if you want to help a guy who's going for it, yeah, there's a Patreon. It's for people who want to support the creative projects being powered by this channel, which is the Let's Plays and the game dev. And I don't like having gated content, so there's no secret sauce the patrons get. Sometimes I'll just ask them Like, what game should I do next? And by the way, a lot of the time whenever I do that, people are like, "What? Follow your heart, man." And it's like, yeah, I know, but my heart has like 3 or 4 options, and I don't care which one wins most of the time. So I'm asking you to help me pick. Sometimes I really do want pepperoni and mushroom or Hawaiian pizza, like either of them. And I just don't care. Which one do you want? I'll go with that one. Anyway, I do think I always had the plan in the back of my mind that I'd throw in something special when the game was done for the patrons, or the patronuses as I call them. I'm not exactly certain on what that would be. Flirted with the ideas of like, okay, you could pick from, I could put together a special version of the game because having print design skills is very handy. Yeah, special version or something. An art book if we have enough art. I don't know if I can afford to hire an artist for enough to fill out a book, but we could maybe like combine that with some sheet music, create a nice little collectible, sign it. I don't know. There's lots of ideas. So maybe I can bribe you with that. Anyway, that's the reality now. So yeah, if you're on the fence, go for it, please. And if you can't, or if you don't want to, I appreciate and respect both of those. Maybe if you don't want to, I don't appreciate it, but I respect it. I'm an acquired taste at best. And lastly, all right, let's talk about the game. It's a story-driven Metroidvania, which I've mentioned before. The degree to which... You know what? All right, let's talk story. But I don't actually want to spoil the story, so I'm going to talk about ingredients. We'll keep things like higher level, and I'll talk about like the different themes and stuff that went into it. And I've tried recording this segment like 6 times, and I keep erasing it. So this is the one we're sticking with it. I'm going to try to keep it concise. And look, hopefully you think all these sorts of ideas combining could form an interesting story. Because again, for the spoiler phobes out there, I'm not one of them, but I got to be sympathetic to y'all. So I don't want to spoil too much where story is really important to this game, and I think one of the major selling points. So I'm going to tell you the themes and the sorts of things I've been thinking about for the last 4-ish years, or a lot of them go back further, but they were part of the alchemy going on in my mind at the same time. And I'll go in order down my list. So I got 6 main beats. And if you think they're interesting, then hey, you'll probably really like the story if you like the same sorts of stuff I do. If you like me talking, then you're in the right place. And hopefully you like it. And if you hate the story, like when you play the game and you're like, oh, the story sucks, then you know I'm just a bad writer. But in the meantime, we know the ingredients are good. Hopefully the recipe turns out. All right, first thing, Metroid Other M. So I hated it. The game's got a lot of really good redeeming qualities, but the story's terrible. They really botched Samus as a character. And a lot of people, when it came out, were like, yeah, maybe the people who invented boob physics are not the best writers for a character like Samus, who I always envisioned as this almost film noir-y type, because she's kind of got a dark profession and has seen some stuff. And orphan, raised in an alien culture, so I imagine she'd be a little weird, probably quiet. She's got a very introverted line of work, because Metroid games are all about like feeling isolated and uncomfortable. Metroid games aren't fun. They're intense. They're fun the same way like escaping a tiger alive is fun. So that was Samus to me. They were like, no, she's like got daddy issues. That's her thing. So my general disappointment with that. And can I just complain for a minute? I get why she's not allowed to use missiles at first. I think it's weird that Samus would agree to have like locks built into her alien power suit, but whatever. I get that don't use missiles as part of the mission at the beginning, but is the grappling beam really... yeah, whatever. It didn't work. So that was bouncing around in my mind, this whole idea of how would I do a Metroidvania game? And that's even where the name of my company, Reclamation Games, it came from that of like, I'm going to do the Reclamation projects, like, because they're working on Metroid Prime 4, probably, but that was looking like that might have been the end of the series for a while. And so I can't write a Metroid game. I don't own the rights, but, I can write a story about a female character in a Metroidvania environment dealing with an interesting dilemma and who has interesting thoughts and an interesting way of thinking. So that's what I did. The other main thing bouncing around in the back of my mind was I really like the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice. And a lot of the time when I want to do a game project or something, or like I'll write down every story idea that I think is good, basically. I write it down. I have them going back to when I was 16. They're not all good, but I also iterate on a lot of them and they become better. And I wanted to do this retelling of Orpheus and Eurydice, which is 30-second version of the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice is Orpheus is the singer. Eurydice is the woman he loves. On their wedding day, she gets bit by a snake and dies from the venom. She goes down to the underworld. She gets there by dying. He like journeys through caves, works his way through there. He's a super talented singer that sometimes helps him. And he gets to Hades and Persephone. And he pours all of his grief and pain into a song. And for the first and only time, Hades says, okay, she can go back. But you're not allowed to see what the human soul looks like. So you can't look at her until she leaves the underworld and has her form back. So she follows his voice, covers his eyes, and he leads her out. When he exits the underworld, he turns around to look at his bride, and she's still standing in the underworld, and boom, she's gone. And that idea of, I don't know, I think about things that are just out of reach a lot. I think that's really powerful. I think I don't know, so many things in life are just a little bit out of reach. Something about that appealed to me. And then that combined with Run Lola Run. Here's a fun personal story about me. I took a film studies elective when I was in university because they didn't all have to be science courses, which was nice. I recommended the course to Talman, who took it. He got a different prof and it was terrible, but I had a really good prof and it was awesome. Pick your courses based on your profs, people. And so I had this Polish prof, and the language was sometimes a barrier for her. The only time it really came up was the final paper. I interpreted, and many other people in the class interpreted it as write a paper on a movie we didn't watch. As it turns out, it was write a paper on a movie we did watch. So at first I wrote this really good paper. I was really proud of it. It's one of two papers I was proud of. On Run Lola Run, which is this German movie from the 90s. The shtick is, you should just watch it. It's really good. Anyone who's seen it will be like, oh, I know why you picked that movie. Lola is this girl. She gets a phone call from her boyfriend, Manny, who really is not cut out to be a criminal, but he struck a deal with a gangster. He needed to give him $150,000 20 minutes from now. And he left the bag of money on the train. Manny's really not a good criminal. And so they have 20 minutes to come up with the money or they're both dead. So the movie happens 3 times. So both Lola and Manny, they're the two main characters. It's mostly from Lola's point of view, but they need to find a way to get $150,000 in 20 minutes. And they don't really have anything but like the people they know. And Manny has a gun. So you can commit another crime and see if that one will fix things. The first time, Lola runs from her apartment down to the street. And the second time, she falls down the first flight of stairs and gets there a little bit later. And then the third time, she jumps down the first flight of stairs and is like 1 second earlier. So the first 10 seconds of each time you see the movie, they're the same. And then they get a little bit different, and then they get radically different, and then they're completely unrecognizable from each other. So it's this exploration of cause and effect, which is like been bouncing around in my head. I had this really good paper. I had all this thinking I put into it, and nothing ever came of it. And so it's floating around in the back of my mind. And that tied into the game because, okay, now I'm thinking of Orpheus and Eurydice. If Orpheus had a second try, I bet things would look quite different. That doesn't necessarily mean it would work, but it'd be interesting, this idea of re-examining your regrets. And then this is going to kind of tie in. It'll seem like a jump, but we'll get there again. Feminist Frequency, Anita Sarkeesian dropped like the tropes versus women in gaming thing. Gamergate exploded. Everyone hated everyone. I don't really care about, do you agree with her? Do you not agree? Which side of the debate are you on? I don't care about any of that. I could not be less interested. I care about, what did I think about? She was like, damsel in distress is a terrible trope and shouldn't happen. And like right around then, Y Caliber, Matt, Snapwave. I forget which one he was at the time, but we played the Star Trek game and they did a damsel in distress thing. And the story was bad in that game. The game was not great. It was a fun Let's Play. It's on his channel. they did the damsel in distress thing, and it was like the weakest part, and you're like, oh, this sucks. I get her point. But I always thought about Chrono Trigger, a game about cause and effect and changing things. And in that game, Statute of Limitations is up. It came out 24 years ago. Really early on, Marl gets erased from time. They travel back 400 years accidentally, basically. She alters history really just by looking like one of her ancestors, and people who are trying to save her ancestor save her instead, think they've done it, and her ancestor is going to die, which means Marl will never be born, so she ceases to exist. So she's kind of in distress. I saw that beat as how that resolves is a really cool story about friends helping each other. And I mean, technically saving Marl's the trophy at the end, but it seemed like the right way of doing it. And then later on in the game, this becomes foreshadowing for a role reversal where Chrono's going to be in trouble and everybody else is going to help him out. And it's this beautiful moment of reciprocity and foreshadowing and reinforcement of the sort of optimistic themes of the game, that bad, horrible, terrible things happen, but something can be done about them and people will help you. I thought that was really interesting. And again, Chrono Trigger is this massive examination of cause and effect and how things affect other things. And some of them are on purpose and some of them are not. Like the first thing that happens after they go back after time traveling is Chrono's brought Marl back from being erased from history. And one of the side effects of them messing around back in time is that back then everyone realized, oh yeah, this was a crime that we let slip by. We got to tighten up the criminal justice system. And Chrono comes back and is immediately arrested for abducting Marl because he led to a stricter justice system that was not the same as when he left. But history only mostly went back the way it was. It's delightful. So this idea of getting a do-over and how would it be different, I've thought about a lot. And so that's a major part of the story. Because Metroidvania games are all about backtracking and revisiting the same place. But some people hate that. You can do game design things just, you know, to make it like efficient. So like if you know the route, you can shortcut and do all these things. Or you can do it one way if you don't have the power up. But if you come back and you do have the power up, the rooms are really different. So it's not as monotonous. Or even just like if you make a room not symmetrical. So imagine a hill slanting down. Okay, if you go left to right, you're going down the hill. That's one problem. If you go back to the right to left, you're going uphill. That's different. So there's things you can do, so it's not bad. But the whole point, the idea I thought of backtracking a Metroidvania game, it's like, well, that's kind of like revisiting the same problem in your life, but with different knowledge. And that sort of ties into all these different things. So that's what's bouncing around in the back of my mind. All of that stuff is combining to make the story of the game. And if that sounds interesting to you, I'm glad, and I hope you like it, because I wrote a story weaving all this together. Also a little bit of Old Man in the Sea, because I wanted to make... There's like some personal aspects to the story as well, because I've always... The idea of things being out of reach, for me, that was making video games. I don't know why I never thought it was possible. Count of Monte Cristo factored in as well, which has got a lot about... You should just read it. It's the fastest 1,000-page book you'll ever read. It's got a lot about the nature of happiness as well. Some bad things happen to Edmond Dante. And do you have to go through hell to get to heaven? My experience in life has been yes. So all that got poured in. Old Man in the Sea, the nature and anatomy of doing something difficult. And so I hope it's a poignant story. Thematically, I think some people find like some similarities with Celeste, with a really, really, really big difference of Celeste is fundamentally about like anxiety. It's Madeline versus herself and versus the mountain. It's man versus himself and man versus nature. Mine's a man versus man story. Like all of these things are manifested externally. So it's a lot more about like the obstacles in life rather than the obstacles within yourself. Yeah, so that's what I wrote about. Poured it all. I spent basically 4 years working on the story and like iterating it from like really early concepts to a 150-page thing in only one form, because depending on the order you choose things are different. So there's multiple versions of the script, and hopefully that'll help replayability. The game will be very different Well, not very different. It'll be different. It doesn't branch like crazy or anything. But yeah, I hope all that sounds really interesting to you. All of that is like the story tapestry of Metroidvania that's being propelled by its story. Because for me, narrative has always been the most important thing about video games, right? Like, I talk about this in lots of my stuff, but for the refresher, even if the narrative is, I was running from this guy who had a shotgun, but I ran past my teammate who had a sniper rifle and he picked him off. That's a story. This was happening, therefore this happened, but then this twist happened. Like, that's got all the beats of a story, and it's just like from a 5-second experience you had playing Overwatch. The point is, it's always the unit of story is what like meaningful game experiences happen in. And so sometimes you really literally just write a story and that happens, or you create a game that tries to create interesting things. Because like if you play a game, generally people talk about it like a game balance or a game feel or like difficulty settings, keeping a player in the flow channel. Like they talk about it in those terms, but I still think it fundamentally boils down to a narrative. It's like if you're just playing a game and it's too easy and you're just whack-a-moling the enemies and just shooting them, it's boring because the narrative never changes. I saw this guy, so I shot him, and then I saw this guy, so I shot him. And then this guy came out, therefore I shot him. Therefore that guy came out and I shot him. Like, that's a boring story. This segment's 18 minutes long. I tried to cut it shorter. Sorry, everyone. I hope you like it. All right, let's talk gameplay. I keep calling it a story-driven Metroidvania, so I'll elaborate on what I mean when I say that. The story-driven part is just that the story is important to it. Again, I don't want to spoil much because, the joy of discovering these things for the first time is important to people. I'll say this. What Breath of the Wild did for Zelda games, that sort of philosophy I have applied a little bit to Metroidvania. So in Breath of the Wild, you do the tutorial area on the Great Plateau, you find Kakariko, and then they're basically just like, hey, there's these 4 things that are really important. You can just check them out. You don't even have to in Breath of the Wild, but you totally should. Just to give you a little direction. Mine's less open than that. You have more control. Because most Metroidvania games, there's a critical path that you stay on. And sometimes you can sequence break, but honestly, most of the time, barring really weird speedrunning strategies, and let's just ignore anything that took them longer than 10 years to discover, okay? Because once they're like ripping through the game's source code and everything, we're not really talking about playing the game the same way anymore. This is not your vanilla playthrough. There's not a ton of major sequence breaking. Like, if you know how to do the wall kick in Super Metroid, you can get the wave beam earlier, and it doesn't really change a ton. You get it maybe one mini boss earlier, and it helps, but it's not a huge, meaningful difference in the game. If you know the wall kick, you can get the spacer beam earlier. It just prevents you from having to backtrack after you get the high jump boots, which are the next power up. So there's things that can be done. You can get to Kraid without the high jump boots, but again, that's a pretty minor sequence break. It's going to be the next power-up you get if you bother getting it, which you probably will. Again, the critical path is actually pretty strong, which means secretly Metroidvania games, or at least Metroid games we'll say, are actually quite linear. Or the only real difference between that and, let's say, a Mario game is that you have to figure out the path yourself, and it looks open because they show you the locked door before they give you the key. Mario's never locked out of the castle once he gets to the flagpole at the end of the stage. He just goes, right? So those are still pretty linear. I took a different approach where you have a little flexibility in the middle of the game. So that's the note about exploration there. I'll leave it at that. I won't elaborate further. And of course, let's say there's 3 doors, A, B, and C. You can open them in any door you want. If you open door A, or you go through door A, and you get something, and then you go through door B, you still have that something. So your experience of door B is very different because you went through door A first. So if you wanted to do it differently on a different playthrough, I already mentioned the story implications, there would be gameplay implications too, because you would have different power-ups that time. And this is significant because I picked a female protagonist, and part of that is like one of the major motivations was because I had a story I was bouncing around. Other thing is I'm kind of like, it's an homage to Metroid, right? It's based on my dissatisfaction with Other M. So Reina, if you use a little bit of imagination, that's a bit like Samus's last name. It's almost like an anagram of it. I also really like the name. There's lots of reasons why that's her name. Anyway, she's not like Samus though. Samus is something like 6'2" and 180 pounds and like this tank of a woman, you know, like she can take care of herself, super powerful, athletic body. That's not Reina. She's not a wuss, but she's tiny. She's 5'5". Tiny if you're about to fight a bunch of people, right? If you're 5'5", in the game she weighs 132 pounds in the physics system, that's 60 kilograms. If you're that tall and that heavy, you're probably not beating up all the bouncers around town, you know what I mean? And she fights only at melee range. I even used to have a couple ranged attacks where she would have the sword and she could like throw it and then use one of the artifacts. I call the power-ups artifacts in the game because they're sort of like these things that get excavated. She had one called, still has, one called the Spider Grip, which lets her like, think of it as like a really powerful magnet you can shoot out with pinpoint accuracy. So she would like throw a sword and then magnetize it and Spider Grip it and pull it back. And, you know, she would use the same power up to like pull herself towards walls from across the room and that sort of thing. I think it's kind of cool. I took it out because it's important for a gameplay point of view that she doesn't have a ranged attack. Getting close is one of the challenges and using her mobility, because the fact is, if you are that small and reasonably, you know, athletic and young, you're a kind of tricky target. So she uses her squirminess and slightness to bounce around the room. You use the walls a lot, at least I do, to work around and give yourself evasion options. More like Mega Man X than Mega Man. In Mega Man X games, you use the walls a lot to your advantage because you can kick off of them. So she's got that going for her, and you're using all of that so you can get close because her main weapon is a sword throughout the game. And you're primarily fighting people with guns. And I like that idea that you have to get close to something dangerous. And you have to get closer to it, making it more dangerous until you finally reach the sweet spot. So that's the idea of the combat, is it's this most mobility thing. Not like Mega Man, not like Metroid in that regard. Those games get their tension from having the threat come towards you and you're trying to preserve range and not get too close. But to me, that, I don't know. There's a lot of good games in those series, but I always think the idea of you have to initiate. So mechanically, it's all about closing distance. I like punchy games, and I say that like in terms of feel, not like literal punching. It's just faster paced combat, less mashing, and more mobility. If you're into the Kingdom Hearts games, less 3, more 2 is what I would say there. Just there's not a ton of sitting back and wailing on enemies. Find the right moment, find the right path, get close, dodge all the attacks, get in close on an enemy, finish them off quickly, and then move on to the next one. So it's fast paced, more like Guacamelee 1, I would say, and all about just keeping you moving. In my opinion, good platform style combat is all about movement, and so that's what I'm building. And a lot of the best moments I've had playing video games were multi-target environments. I think the ultimate anticlimax is like an MMO having a giant the shadow demon and 25 people standing in a circle just wailing on them over and over and over while they are like unmoved. They don't buckle, they don't bounce around, and everyone's just standing there. Like, I've played some good MMOs, but man, that layout is pretty common in MMOs, and it's just completely uninspiring to me. I don't know, being surrounded by 10 enemies, you could take out any one of them in one attack, but there's 10 of them. I think that's more interesting, especially if they could take you out in 2. Now you're on your toes. Rather than this stand still, get healed indefinitely by your healer who's got your back and just keep wailing. Like, that's boring. I don't mean offense to anyone who likes those games. I like some games like that too. I'm just saying that's not what we're doing here. One last note about gameplay I'll throw in. I wanted to talk about boss fights. I don't like boss fights that are overly partitioned. You know what I mean, where like you have to fight some guy who starts on a horse and you knock them off, basically doing a micro mini game that's like really disconnected from the game mechanics in general. And then you can wail on them for exactly 1/3 of their health, and then they hop on their griffin, and now it's very similar, but it's an iteration because now they're flying. I hate that. If my weapon were stronger, I know that I should have been able to do more than 1/3 damage. Maybe I should be able to 2-cycle them instead of 3-cycle. You know, it's just super programmed that when they get to 1/3, they jump up. I think that's lame. And if you do it, oh, they get knocked down for 10 seconds, that's no better. I prefer like what you would see in a Mega Man X game, where they're going to come at you, you're going to go at them, good luck. It's a fight, right? You're just looking for your opening, and if you have a really powerful weapon, great, you'll get lots of damage in. Or if you're really good at finding the openings, or like, you know, really skilled, so you can give yourself these little chip shots that you get in, you know, great. That's to your credit. And if you can't, I hope your defense is good. Like, I love that. That's how I believe in doing boss fights. So there's, you know, a little partitioning I think is okay. That's all I'm going to mention for now. If there's anything else you want to know, you've been getting little snapshots of the music. I showed a few pieces of the art, like 3D art and everything. Over the course of development, I'm going to be doing more development videos because I'm working on the game full time. I'm recording this part on Monday. I just had my first full-time day of working for myself, and it was awesome. But yeah, that's where we're at. Going to keep doing the channel, going to loop you in more on this stuff, and development's going to pick right up. Difficult times are ahead, but I'm very happy that they're the ones I chose. I expect the journey to actually be maybe the most difficult thing I ever do, but I intend to succeed. I intend to release a game and for it to be good in my own view. And if you want to help, that'd be great. And if you have ideas for like, hey, I'll kick in something on Patreon, but I want this sort of thing, we can at least have that discussion in the comment section here. And if you're a Patreon, or if you're a Patronus and you want to put something on the Patreon boards, do it. We'll have a talk there. And I hope you'll join me for this exciting chapter. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you in the next video.